The next morning arrived like a bad omen, slipping in on soft feet. For Eason alone, it became a private apocalypse, a morning that cracked the world without ceremony. The city still slept. Marilyn and Sug were elsewhere, untouched by what was about to happen. Only Eason stood at the edge of collapse. She moved through her routine as if guided by an unseen hand. The television murmured to itself, its light flickering like a restless spirit against the walls. She brushed her teeth, poured cereal into a bowl, and the spoon clinking too loudly in the quiet kitchen. Normal things, she told herself. If she could finish breakfast, perhaps the day would behave. But her hands shook. From the depths of the television's noise, a name drifted out. Thin. Unmistakable. It slipped through the static like a blade through silk. Her body reacted before her mind did. She froze, toothpaste foaming at the corner of her mouth. Time stretched, thin and painful. She spat into the sink and hurried to the television, bare feet cold against the floor, heart pounding as if it were trying to escape her ribs. The headlines struck without mercy. 2 priests were executed in the heart of issue by the Royal Guard. The screen cut to footage that should never have been aired. Her mother, blooded, was forced to kneel. Her father was thrown aside as if his life weighed nothing at all. The camera did not look away. Issue never looked away. Eason felt the air leave her lungs. This was not news. This was a warning. The regime wanted eyes. They wanted witnesses. They wanted fear to settle into the bones of the people, to teach them obedience through horror. Break the rules, and your death will be public. Your suffering will be shared. Even the sacred would be dragged through the dirt if it served the throne. Her grief rose slowly, like ink spreading through water. Rage followed, heavy and hot, pressing against her chest. She could do nothing. She could reach no one. Her parents' pain played on a loop, eternal, untouchable. For a moment, she thought she might collapse. Instead, something inside her hardened. Beneath the sorrow, beneath the trembling, resolve took shape. Sharp, cold, clear. As long as the royal family ruled unchallenged, this would never end. Innocents would fall again and again, like offerings to a god that demanded blood. Perhaps Sug would rise against them. Perhaps he would not. But rebellion did not wait for permission. Sometimes, it began with grief. Eason wiped her face with the back of her hand. The tears stopped, not because the pain faded, but because anger had taken its place. She stood, turned off the television with a decisive click, and left the bowl of cereal untouched on the counter. Milk slowly soaked the flakes, unnoticed. She walked out the door without locking it. The city swallowed her as she moved from hotel to hotel, her questions repeating like a prayer she refused to abandon. A man with black hair, pale skin, eyes that looked as if they had learned to survive the cold of Talvaya, the land where frost whispered secrets to those who listened too long. Each answer was the same. No one had seen him. No one recognized the name. No one knew who she was talking about. Still, Eason kept walking. In her chest, grief burned steadily, like a coal that would not go out. By late afternoon, the city had begun to feel endless. After hours of doors that led nowhere, Eason noticed the last building on the block, as if it had been deliberately overlooked. It was a bar in name only, a place that clung to the idea of a hotel the way a ghost clings to a ruined house. The neon sign above it buzzed and stuttered, half its letters long dead, bathing the cracked pavement in a sickly, uneven glow. The light pulsed like a failing heartbeat. Someone stood outside. A man leaned against the brick wall, shoulders slumped, exhaling cigarette smoke in long, practiced breaths. The smoke curled around him and dissolved into the cold air, as if even it wanted to escape. He looked like a remnant of a past that refused to stay buried, a swollen beer belly straining against a stained shirt, a thin goatee clinging stubbornly to his jaw, his mouth set in a permanent clench. His eyes were hollow, the kind carved out by years of losing battles no one else could see. Faded tattoos crept along his arms, their meanings long forgotten, and his nails were chewed down to raw edges. Eason felt her heart stumble. Still, she hurried toward him, urgency propelling her forward. Her footsteps echoed too loudly in her ears, and the man stirred, lifting his head as if surfacing from a shallow sleep. She stopped just short of him, breath unsteady. "Have you seen a man with black hair and pale skin?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. His name is Sug. Please. I'm just trying to find him. Her words spilled out, bare and unguarded. Desperation marked her face more clearly than fear. The man studied her in silence. His gaze dragged, lingering in places it should not have. Irritation twisted into something sharper, something opportunistic. He flicked ash to the curb and spoke, his voice rough, scraped raw by alcohol and years of disappointment. Might be I've seen someone like that, he said slowly. But information like that doesn't come cheap. A crooked smile crept across his lips, thin and knowing. Eason shrank back on instinct. Her shoulders curled inward as she reached into her purse, fingers trembling as they brushed against loose coins. The street suddenly felt too open, her skin too exposed, as though she had stepped into a space where rules no longer applied. Before the man could say more, a presence shifted behind him. From the bar's shadowed doorway, another figure emerged. Marilyn. He stepped into the light with measured ease, tall and composed, his stillness carrying weight. He stopped beside the man, saying nothing at first. The man ignored him until something in Marilyn's posture made him look again. This time, he stiffened. Marilyn's gaze was calm, steady, and entirely uninterested in games. "There's no need for that, honey," Marilyn said quietly. His voice was gentle, but it left no room for argument. "Just follow me." The man's smile faltered. His bravado collapsed into awkward silence as Marilyn guided Eason away. Even as they walked, Eason felt the man's eyes cling to her back, invasive and lingering, like a stain that would not wash away. Inside, the bar swallowed them in smoke and dim light. The air smelled of old alcohol, sweat, and regret. Patrons hunched over sticky tables, their laughter thin and tired, as if performed out of habit rather than joy. Marilyn moved with purpose, weaving through the room, Eason close behind. They climbed a battered staircase that groaned underfoot. Halfway up, Marilyn glanced over his shoulder. "Did you really look at every single hotel just to find us?" Eason's cheeks warmed. She lowered her gaze, suddenly aware of how small she felt. "Yeah," she admitted. I need to talk to Sug. If that's okay." Her voice carried exhaustion, the kind earned through repetition and refusal. At the top of the stairs, Marilyn stopped in front of a faded door. He rested his hand on the knob but did not turn it yet. For a moment, the hallway was silent, dust drifting through a narrow shaft of light. "Before you enter this room," he said softly, "know that you're one of us now. You're helping us tear down a force so that another might rise. Once you step inside, there's no turning back." Eason looked at him, then at the door. She nodded. "I know," she whispered. Marilyn opened it. The room beyond was dim, sunlight slipping through dusty blinds in thin, pale lines. Sug stood inside, pulling on his shirt. When he saw her, something in his face eased. A real smile surfaced, unguarded, as if the weight he carried had lightened, if only slightly. Marilyn stepped in after her and closed the door, leaning against the dresser, his posture relaxed but attentive, like a sentry choosing to trust. Eason hesitated, then spoke. "We have to stop them," she said, her voice low but urgent. "If we don't act now, we may never get another chance. They'll grow stronger, faster, more ruthless." Her fingers twisted together as she looked down, unable to meet Sug's eyes. Sug stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. The embrace was firm, wordless, an answer that required no explanation. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to lean into it. Then she pulled away. Her gaze flicked toward Marilyn, self-consciousness rushing in, uncertainty tightening her chest. She didn't know where she stood. She didn't know what lines existed, or whether she had crossed one without realizing. In the quiet room, the future hovered, fragile and sharp, waiting to be chosen. Marilyn looked at Eason for a long heartbeat. Then he laughed. The sound rang through the room with an echo that did not belong to the walls or air. It lingered, layered, as if another voice laughed just beneath his own, older and farther away. Even the dust motes in the sunlight seemed to pause, trembling in place. "Darling," he said, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. "Don't worry. You can have him." He tilted his head towards Sug, smiling. "I'm the god he told you about." With an easy hop, Marilyn slid off the dresser. The moment his feet touched the floor, the room seemed to inhale. His outline wavered, like heat rising from stone. The human shape he wore loosened and fell away, not torn, not destroyed, but gently released, as if it had served its purpose. Light gathered. His eyes turned gold, deep and luminous, reflecting something vast and patient. His skin took on a quiet glow, as though dawn itself had chosen to live beneath it. A cloak unfolded behind him, woven of starlight and memory, threads shifting like constellations seen through water. The air grew warm, calm, impossibly gentle. When Marilyn spoke again, his voice carried weight without force, a presence that settled rather than crushed. "I am Marilyn," he said, "the god of hope." His gaze turned to Eason. "And you are Eason, yes." Eason's breath caught, but she did not step back. Her hands curled at her sides, grounding herself. After a moment, she gave a small, almost polite smile. "I've never heard of you," she admitted. There was no insult in her words, only honesty. Marilyn's expression softened. "That's only natural," he replied. "I come from another world, a twin to this one, Earth." He paused, as if choosing each word with care. "My role here is different, but our paths have already crossed. From this point on, our fates are bound." Eason glanced at Sug. In her chest, something loosened. The weight did not disappear, but it shifted, becoming something she could carry. For the first time since the morning, the impossible no longer felt absolute. Perhaps the royal family could fall. Perhaps the story did not end in blood alone. Before she could speak, Marilyn turned sharply toward the window. The air changed. "We don't have much time," he said. "We need to reach issue. Eden and Timothy are already moving." His golden eyes narrowed, focused on something far beyond the city. "I can feel them. They're closer than you think." Eason frowned. The names meant nothing to her, but there was no space to ask. Whatever this was, it had already begun. They moved quickly. The hotel seemed to shrink behind them as they descended the stairs and passed through the bar. The laughter and smoke felt distant now, like a memory belonging to another life. When they stepped outside, the city greeted them with a restless hum. Lights flickered. Voices overlapped. Somewhere, drums tested their rhythm. The festival of flame was awakening. Eason slowed and turned to the others, her voice low, measured. "We have to be careful," she said. "Getting into issue today won't be simple. The festival draws crowds from everywhere. Lanterns will fill the sky, meant to renew the dragon's watch." She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the sound. The priests chant blessings in Japanese, Chinese, and Old Ichwan. Prayers for fortune, for protection. The city will be alert. Sug exhaled slowly, then looked at Marilyn, a thin smile tugging at his mouth. "Then I guess it's time to see what you can really do." Marilyn smiled in return. Not playful now, but steady. Certain. "Yes," he said. "It's time." Above them, the city prepared to burn with light. The journey to the Totsuya ruins did not announce itself with danger. It began quietly, which made it worse. They walked for hours through lowlands drowned in mist, the world reduced to pale silhouettes and the soft crunch of wet earth beneath their feet. Reeds bowed under the weight of moisture, and every step released the smell of rot and old water. No birds sang. Even insects seemed to hold their breath. It felt less like traveling through land and more like passing through a memory that refused to fade. At the edge of the swamp, a narrow boat waited, its wood warped and scarred by years of neglect. It creaked as they boarded, protesting their presence. The water was black and unmoving, a mirror of the bruised sky above. As the oars dipped in, slow ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection until sky and swamp became indistinguishable. Something moved beneath the surface. Shadows drifted just out of sight, large and patient. Now and then, a distant cry echoed across the water, mournful and thin, as if some creature were calling for something it had already lost. The sound carried far, then vanished. Each mile pressed heavier against their chests, a growing sense that the land itself remembered what had been done here and had never forgiven it. When the mist thinned, the ruins emerged. They rose from a low island like a wound that refused to close. Colossal mirrors and shattered stone formed a vast, disordered labyrinth, half swallowed by time. This was the legacy of Emperor Totsuya II. Centuries ago, he had stood here and split issue from Zoes, forging the First War army and binding the land with a curse meant to last forever. The air around the ruins felt different, thicker, watchful. It was said that the souls of fallen warriors lingered here, caught between reflections, unable to pass on. Bound to glass and regret, they replayed their final moments again and again, searching for absolution that would never come. The mirrors were monstrous. They towered like silent buildings, sheets of glass stretched toward the sky, their surfaces warped and clouded by age. Some stood whole, their reflections bending the world into unfamiliar shapes. Others lay cracked or splintered, jagged edges catching a pale, unnatural light. Between them, narrow corridors twisted and shifted, bending in ways that defied reason. The staircase leading to Issue City existed somewhere within, but it could never be seen from the same place twice. The maze did not stay still. Isen stepped off the boat first. Mud sucked at her boots as she planted her feet on the shore. She inhaled slowly, the damp air filling her lungs. Of the three, she knew this place best. Her voice remained calm, but it carried weight. "Be careful," she said. "The spirits of dead warriors live between the mirrors. They reveal every lie, every betrayal." She glanced at the glass towers, their surfaces faintly trembling. If you listen to their whispers or provoke them, they will pull you apart from the inside. Many lose themselves here, to madness, to regret. Marilyn let out a short laugh, light and dismissive. "I'll be fine," he said. Yet his gaze lingered longer than he intended, tracing the shifting corridors. For all his confidence, even he felt it. The quiet judgment of the place. The sense of being measured. Soog said nothing. Dread tightened in his stomach like a clenched fist. Memories stirred unbidden, heavy and unwelcome. Faces. Decisions. Blood. He wondered what the mirrors would show him, and whether he had the strength to stand before himself without turning away. As they moved forward, the maze seemed to breathe. The corridors shifted with a soft, grinding murmur, stone and glass sliding into new paths. The air grew colder, biting at exposed skin. From somewhere deep within, voices rose, low and indistinct. War chants. Final confessions. Promises broken in the heat of battle. The spirits whispered without mouths, their words woven into the wind. The three drew closer together, their footsteps echoing faintly between the towering mirrors. With each step, the world behind them felt farther away, thinner, as if it might vanish entirely if they looked back too long. They were walking into a place where memory and nightmare shared the same shape. And once inside, escape was never guaranteed. At first, it was subtle. The air tightened, as if the maze had drawn a slow breath and refused to let it go. Even Marilyn felt it, a faint pressure against his presence, like unseen fingers testing the edge of divinity. The mirrors no longer reflected cleanly. Their surfaces quivered, bending light into unfamiliar shapes, as though reality itself were uncertain which form to keep. Without realizing when it happened, they drifted apart. Marilyn moved ahead, his step steady. Soog followed at a cautious distance. Isen lagged behind, her gaze drawn to the mirrors, to the way shadows lingered a heartbeat too long. Then the maze moved. Glass towers slid with a grinding murmur, corridors folding in on themselves like the closing ribs of a beast. Reflections shattered and reassembled, paths severing in a violent, soundless dance. In the space between one breath and the next, the connections between them were gone. Soog. Isen reached out, her fingers slicing through cold air. The maze surged faster, mirrors flashing past her vision, light fracturing into blinding shards. Soog's form vanished, swallowed by overlapping reflections. Silence followed. Not an empty silence, but a listening one. The sound of voices faded, replaced by something else. A rising cry, distant yet intimate, echoing through the glass. The air grew heavy, thick with grief, pressing against her chest until breathing felt deliberate. Isen turned slowly, searching for something familiar. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun, heart hammering. Stella stood there, unharmed, whole, too whole. Relief surged through Isen's body, overwhelming reason. She ran toward her, instinct screaming escape. But before she could reach her, A voice cut through the air. Help! Help! It was weak, broken. A child's voice, trembling and wet, as though spoken underwater. The sound curled around her heart, tugging at a memory she had buried deep, beneath years of denial. Her feet slowed. The plea came again, closer now, vibrating through her bones. She turned her head toward it, and in that instant, the world tilted. Darkness rushed in, thick and suffocating. Her neck snapped toward the sound against her will, her body moving as though guided by invisible hands. The mirrors closed around her. She fell into a narrow space between reflections, a place without horizon or sky. Darkness pressed in from all sides. The air smelled of cold water and old tears. From the void ahead, a hand reached out, fingers clawing desperately, scraping against nothing. A face emerged, pale, terrified, mouth open in a silent scream that tore itself free a moment later. Help me. Eason didn't hesitate. She ran forward and seized the hand, pulling with all her strength. The moment the figure emerged, a chill tore through her spine. It was a child. Her brother. His eyes were wide, glassy with fear, his small body trembling as though frozen in time. The world spun. Panic flooded her chest, sharp and blinding. No, 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 no. Her arms locked. Something seized her from within, tightening her muscles, forcing her hands forward. She tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. Her body betrayed her, pushing her back toward the darkness. Her fingers slipped from her grasp, her cries rising, frantic, piercing. The water returned. The weight. The silence beneath the surface. Eason sobbed as her hands moved on their own, drowning him again, watching his form disappear into the void. She collapsed, choking on air, tears streaming down her face. The mirrors flared to life around her, their surfaces filling with memory. The truth she had never spoken. The day at the lake. The sun too bright. The water too calm. She had not understood then. A child's jealousy. A moment of anger. A push that went too far. Her parents had buried it, wrapped it in lies, told themselves it was an accident. Easier to lose a son than to admit their daughter carried blood on her hands. The spirits did not allow such mercy. Her parents appeared before her, their forms warped and wrong. Her mother's neck bore a deep, brutal scar, as though her head had been twisted violently from her body. Her father's forehead was shattered by a dark, gaping wound. Their skin was grey, stretched tight over lifeless bone. They stepped closer. "Why did you kill your brother?" they asked, voices layered with accusation and sorrow. "You were meant to be good," her father said. "A good girl," her mother whispered, tears streaking down her pale, ruined face. "A good daughter." Their words sank into her like stones. "How could you?" her mother screamed, the sound cracking through the space, splintering the mirrors themselves. Eason covered her eyes, collapsing inward, desperate to disappear. But the spirits fed on her denial. The shadows surged, their forms sharpening, turning into jagged blades of memory and regret. They tore at her, carving pain that was not flesh but something deeper. Her screams dissolved into the chorus of the maze. In the darkness, the mirrors watched. And the spirits waited to see whether she would break, or finally face the truth she had tried so desperately to drown. Out of the shadows and the swirling mist of that treacherous place, Marilyn suddenly emerged, her face a mask of urgency. She rushed towards Eason, her hand moving with purpose to lift her from the ground, snapping her fingers in a defiant gesture that sent the restless spirits scattering away in fear. "Be strong. Don't let it take you," she cried, her voice ringing out with an intensity that belied her own unease. "We've all done things we aren't proud of." But Eason could only stare blankly at her, lost in a tumult of despair. How could anyone, how could she, justify the horror of taking her own brother's life? "I took my brother's life. I deserve to die here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, laden with guilt and sorrow. Marilyn gently cradled Eason's chin, lifting her gaze to meet her own. "No, child, see the truth," she urged, a fierce determination in her tone. With that, she conjured a vision, unveiling a memory long buried deep within Eason's mind. The scene unfolded like a delicate film. Eason was a little girl again, frolicking by the glistening lake, her brother's laughter ringing in the air. They were carefree, lost in their playful banter, a world away from the pain that would come. They stood on the weathered stones at the lake's edge, a daring challenge captivating her brother's spirit as he attempted to leap from one rock to another, heedless of her warnings. "You might fall," she had called out, dread curling in her stomach. But her brother was undeterred, his grin unwavering and full of bravado. And then it happened. The last jump was fateful. He slipped, his body colliding violently against the jagged rock, and in an instant, he fell into the icy depths of the lake. Eason's heart pounded in her chest as she lunged forward, her small hands reaching into the torrent, desperate to save him. But the water was relentless, dragging them away from the safety of shore, wrenching her from him as he slipped into the abyss of nothingness beyond. Eason gasped, pain flooding her senses as she opened her eyes wide, tears streaming down her cheeks. She leaned into Marilyn's comforting embrace, burying her face against her chest. "It was nothing I could do. I was too late," she sobbed, each word laced with the ache of loss. Marilyn held her tightly, her voice tender but firm. "Eason, these mirrors, they twist our stories, distorting them into nightmares. Don't let it trick you. Don't let it change the truth of what happened." Her words were soothing, guiding Eason away from the mirror's cruel deception and back into the safety of the maze they had traversed. As they stepped away from the reflection, the wall shimmered, revealing a staircase leading back to Issue, bathed in a gentle, almost ethereal light. "There's the stairs to Issue," Eason exclaimed, her voice rising in joy for the first time. Marilyn carefully laid her down on the fifth step, the grips of torment and despair finally loosening their hold on her. "I'm going to go find Soog," Marilyn said, her expression resolute. Eason looked up at her, a flicker of hope igniting in her heart. "Okay," she replied, the fear that had once gripped her momentarily fading. Marilyn turned away, determination set in his stride as he ventured deeper into the labyrinth, searching for Soog. Yet even he, with all his strength and focus, found himself ensnared, looping back to familiar paths, confusion clouding her purpose. Meanwhile, Soog stood alone in the dark, his mind teetering on the brink of madness. He was transfixed by his own reflection in the glassy surface, aghast at the figure staring back at him. Was this truly who he had become? The eyes that mirrored his father's piercing gaze, the hands that trembled like his mother's, fragile and worn. With a hesitant motion, he reached out to touch the glass, a wave of despair washing over him as the surface seemed to pulse, just before gently pulling him in. He felt himself floating in a vast abyss, swallowed by darkness for what felt like a mere minute. But then, from the depths of that emptiness, a sound startled him, a noise just beneath him. He turned instinctively, and as he did, the darkness began to dissolve, shaping itself into a vivid and haunting memory he had fought so hard to forget as well. In a dimly lit training ground, surrounded by the echoes of grunts and the sound of clashing wooden swords, there stood a young boy among his 8 siblings, 3 sisters and 4 brothers, all bound together by a single destiny. They were training relentlessly for a moment that loomed ahead, one that would take them to the storied city of Issue, where the throne awaited its rightful claimant. In their father's eyes, his eldest son, Kaz, was the beacon of hope. He had placed immense trust in Kaz, believing he would be the one to restore the family's honor and reclaim the throne that had slipped through their fingers. However, Kaz harbored different desires, yearning only to break free from the suffocating hell that had become their reality. As the family dynamic twisted under the weight of their father's expectations, the remaining siblings, Surik, Gavrela, Nari, Nua, Seika, and Soog, found themselves largely relegated to the shadows of Kaz's ambitions. Their father, who had once engaged with them, had distanced himself significantly over the years. A cruel silence had settled in the household, festering like a wound each time one child fell short of his father's high hopes. When Kaz disappeared, fleeing from the stifling grip of his father's ambitions, hope dimmed, and the father's gaze turned to the next eldest son, Surik. But fate was unkind once again, as Surik too soon vanished into the night, leaving their father's dreams in tatters. The family's misfortunes seemed to crescendo with the tragic death of Nari, who perished in a horrific fire, a twisted trial set by their father, meant to test the resolve of his children. With only 4 siblings remaining, Soog, Seika, Nua, and a heartbroken father clutching at the remnants of his hope, their household grew darker. Their mother began to succumb to illness, her once vibrant spirit now held captive by a relentless sickness that ravaged her body. Yet their father, consumed by despair, began to weave a narrative of curses. He believed the royal family of Issue was behind their downfall, sending spies disguised as his own flesh and blood to sabotage them. Sug, a mere child, was a reluctant witness to the torment of his mother as she lay gasping for life, her body racked with violent spasms and coughing fits that expelled blood and fragments of her life. It was a hellish tableau playing out before him, while his father spiraled deeper into madness, consumed by his delusions. Nhua, unable to bear the sight of their mother's suffering any longer, declared her intention to escape. She urged her siblings to join her in leaving behind a life steeped in despair, hoping to forge a new beginning somewhere far away. But as she began to pack her meager belongings, a silence overtook the room as her siblings, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, simply stared. Before she could slip away into the night, Sug, frightened and desperate, rushed to their father with the news of her plan. In an instant, all hell broke loose. Their father stormed into the children's bedroom, fury blazing in his eyes. He seized Nhua with a grip of iron and hurled her out into the unforgiving dirt, stripping her of not only her belongings but also her dignity, leaving her exposed to the elements, devoid of water, food, or warmth. Then, as if to shut a door on hope itself, he slammed the door behind him, sealing her fate. That night, their father's screams reverberated through the house, accusations spilling forth like dark poison. He called them traitors, devils disguised as kin, impostors sent to undermine him by the royal family of Ishu. His rage was a tempest, and despite their pleas for calm, there was nothing but a wall of madness that separated him from reason. Haunted by the chaos, Sug felt an overwhelming urge to retreat, to find solace in the one place that had once offered him comfort. He dashed to his mother's room, his sanctuary, where he curled up beside her cold body, praying silently for the nightmarish reality surrounding them to dissipate. But sleep came only to offer temporary refuge, as the turmoil of the household sliced through the stillness, a harbinger of events yet to unfold. Awoken abruptly, Sug found his father standing over him, eyes wild with a mania that turned frantic. Without warning, his father yanked him from the warmth of the bed and shook his mother, calling her name with heartbreaking urgency. But she remained still, her spirit having long departed to another realm, leaving Sug paralyzed by fear and confusion, wondering what further torment awaited their fractured family. As Sug turned his head to the mirror hanging on the wall, a solemn reminder of the past flickered in his mind's eye. The reflections danced mockingly, reminding him of moments best forgotten. "You can't play with me like this, spirits," he murmured, his voice a mixture of defiance and despair, hoping against hope that the phantoms would cease their cruel games. But no, it was not as simple as that. They were deeply offended by the accusation that they were lying. As the tension mounted, their whispers escalated, growing louder until they filled the air with a cacophony of agitation. Sug suddenly collapsed to the ground, hitting the earth with a heavy thud, reminiscent of a sack of potatoes being unceremoniously dropped. He sprang back up almost immediately, scanning his surroundings with wide, frantic eyes, desperately hoping to catch a glimpse of the threat lurking just out of sight. The spirits moved with a speed that seemed to defy reality, faster than the blink of an eye, faster than the very air that enveloped him. In a swift, fluid motion, a spectre appeared, its presence cutting through the stillness like a blade, leaving a line of crimson on Sug's abdomen as it slashed through his clothing. Pain bloomed in his gut, and an agonizing mark ripped through his skin. "I will kill every one of you," he screamed in fury, the words echoing ominously in the shadowy void around him. Then, as if conjured by his torment, a spirit materialized behind him, standing as a dark observer amidst the swirling chaos. "Just like you watched your father kill your family," it intoned, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to seep into his very bones. Sug whirled around, heart hammering in his chest, to confront the figure cloaked in shadows, illuminated only by a distant and eerie light that painted it in twilight hues. "That's something you can't escape from, Sug. You could have stopped your father, many times over. He strangled your mother to death, and you were there, sound asleep, well, not really asleep, because you heard it all. You heard him call her a spy," the spirit continued, its words slashing through the air like knives. The other spirits joined in, their laughter rising in a haunting wave, feeding off his anguish. As those dreadful memories began to flood back into his consciousness, Sug's pulse quickened. He felt himself stirring with a mix of dread and shame. You didn't stop him when he threw your sister, just 10 years old, into the wasteland. You know she froze to death, don't you? The spectre taunted, turning to look at him with piercing intensity. "And I hope you haven't forgotten that time your eldest brother ran away. You were only 8 then. Instead of going with him as he begged you to, you stayed behind, not for mother, not for father, but because of your own wretched sickness. You believed that the throne belonged to you, when your family's destiny had never been written on it. You were just like your father, maybe worse. Sug suddenly burst into laughter, a sound that rang eerily through the oppressive atmosphere. The spirit paused, bewildered by the unexpected reaction. Sug's expression shifted as he met the spirit's gaze, a strange light flickering in his eyes. "I am just like my father," he declared with a chilling confidence. The spirits around him recoiled, their disdain for him swelling into a palpable fury. Then, out of the shadows emerged Marilyn, quietly standing behind Sug. With a sudden snap of his fingers, Sug shattered the mirrors that surrounded them, each reflective pane cracking and exploding into countless shards that glimmered like stars for a brief moment before falling to the ground. The maze that had ensnared them was obliterated, leaving only chaos in its wake. Sug lay down on the ground, as though he had crossed through a threshold, beginning a new chapter in his life. Marilyn approached, his footsteps gentle against the debris of the mirror remnants. "Are you okay?" he asked, extending a hand to help Sug rise. "I'm better than ever," Sug replied, his voice carrying a newfound strength. He locked eyes with Marilyn, sensing something profound and transformative within him. It was as if Sug had shed an old skin, revealing a version of himself that was always meant to be. With determination guiding him, Sug began to ascend the staircase, moving almost instinctively, while unaware of the burden he was casting aside. Eason and Marilyn followed closely behind him, the three of them emerging from their ordeal like survivors of a violent storm, but with weary hearts. Although days felt like an interminable stretch of hardship on the staircase, Eason began to show signs of breaking under the strain. Weariness etched into his features as they climbed higher into the unknown. She had forgotten just how painful the climb up these worn stairs could be, each step jarring her feet as they navigated the uneven surfaces that seemed to grow more unpredictable with every ascent toward the heavens. Sug cast a glance back over his shoulder, irritation flickering subtly across his features. Marilyn, perceptive as ever, could easily discern his inner turmoil, but the source of his frustration remained a mystery to her. In that moment, Sug was plagued by odd thoughts. Maybe a spirit had taken hold of him, whispering doubts into his psyche. Drawing closer, Marilyn quickened his pace to match his. "You're different, and I'm beginning to wonder why that is," she ventured, her voice light yet probing. They walked side by side, avoiding each other's gaze, their conversation unfolding like an unspoken battle for attention. "I do feel different," he admitted, his voice low and contemplative. "Everything they showed me," Marilyn interrupted eagerly. "All of that was true. But Eason, hers was all a lie," he stated with a chuckle, a hint of madness lurking beneath his humor. Sug smiled in response. "I sensed all that darkness that hovered over me. I embraced the light, and it didn't feel wrong," he replied, his eyes downcast as if reflecting on memories long past. Marilyn was taken aback, his mind swirling in confusion. "What does it feel like?" Sug's words beckoned a curiosity within him. He paused, searching his thoughts. "It's like truth peeling away the masks people wear, like a flower uprooted from the earth, facing the sun after too long in the shade." Marilyn smiled, though an uneasy knot tightened in her chest. "I'm glad you found something in there," she said, but inwardly, he felt a chasm of despair. She was not truly happy. It all felt reminiscent of Urulin, a world far beyond their awareness where a boy named Break lingered, a shadow maker amidst its chaos. It was a place known for its vast, floating clock tower, suspended in darkness. The hands of that clock did more than tell time. They spun the threads of fate, resetting the destinies of countless lives. Within Urulin, beings crafted possible futures with deliberation, their quills etching the destiny of every soul. Marilyn had once promised to elevate Break, gifting him knowledge from the Tree of Curiosity, only to watch him lose himself in the process. His ambition ignited an unpredictable chaos within him, making him great yet irreparably broken. Marilyn's heart ached as he kept his head held high. He understood that this boy was now lost, far beyond the reach of redemption. At that moment, they heard a soft whimper from behind them. Eason had lagged, her legs buckling beneath her. "I can't walk anymore," she gasped, collapsing onto the steps and clinging to life itself. Marilyn immediately turned back, instinctively rushing down to assist her. But dread gripped him as he noticed that Sug, unbothered, continued his ascent, ignoring her pleas, her struggles, as if she were merely a ghost lingering in his path. It was as if he were already prepared to leave her behind, lost in a labyrinth of his own mind. "What's wrong with him?" Eason murmured, her voice strained. Marilyn, now kneeling beside her, wrapped an arm around her to help lift her. "Change, my dear, change," he replied softly. He couldn't harbor any resentment towards Soog. After all, he himself wasn't innocent. He was no saint, and nothing that boy might choose to do could ever compare to the darkness Marilyn had embraced throughout his own life. Yet, witnessing Soog's transformation felt akin to an eclipse, slipping into an overwhelming darkness. As they climbed together, Marilyn supported Eason, ensuring she steadied herself amid the cloud-like surroundings. They passed through thick wisps of vapor, which Eason playfully swayed her hands through as if they were tall grass. She filled her lungs with the cold, briny scent of ozone that enveloped them. "They smell like the ocean," she exclaimed with delight. Marilyn watched her with a tender smile, recalling days spent in the skies, the serenity of listening to the world below. "They do indeed. I used to spend hours up here, reveling in the symphony of the moving world, but then chaos crept in." Her smile faltered, a shadow of worry passing over her face. "Is that why you're helping him? Because you have hope?" Her tone held a trace of analysis, as if she were piecing together a puzzle of emotions. "I always carry hope, whether I cherish it or not," he replied contemplatively. "It can be a curse sometimes, just another burden to hold you back." She glanced at the stars that peeked through the ethereal clouds, curiosity shining in her eyes. "What do you think will happen when we get up there?" Honestly, Marilyn met her gaze, an infectious laugh escaping him. "That is already in motion," he said, pointing ahead, where the horizon shimmered with possibility, each step bringing them closer to their destiny, woven intricately into the fabric of issue. Emperor Daikai VII sat alone in a chair carved from old brown wood, its surface worn smooth by generations of rulers who had rested there before him. It was positioned beside a tall window, where pale light slipped through paper-thin curtains and pooled quietly at his feet. Beyond the glass, clouds drifted in long, unhurried currents, folding into one another like breath upon breath. He let his gaze follow them. For a moment, he imagined himself dissolving into that sky, his body light enough to be carried wherever the wind wished. No proclamations. No decrees etched in blood. No rules that strangled both ruler and subject alike. In that imagined place, disorder was not feared. Chaos bloomed gently, like wildflowers between stones, untamed yet beautiful. There, he was not emperor. He was simply alive. The thought lingered. Yet beneath that longing rested something quieter, more fragile. Loneliness. He wished for a hand in his own. Not ceremonial, not offered for the sake of appearances, but warm and unwavering. Someone who would stand beside him when the palace corridors felt endless and the crown grew unbearably heavy. Someone whose presence could turn the long night soft, whose voice could chase the shadows from his mind the way dawn breaks apart darkness. Love, he believed, could wash the heart clean, like a clear stream eroding even the deepest stains. A sound broke the silence. Soft footsteps approached, careful not to intrude. An elderly man entered the room, dressed in a traditional issue garment woven with threads of gold that caught the light like autumn leaves. His posture was relaxed, familiar. His eyes, sharp despite age, held a knowing warmth. He paused, allowing the quiet to settle before speaking. "You know," the man said gently, a smile tugging at his lips, "your wife is downstairs searching for you. Everywhere." He chuckled under his breath. "I wagered the last place she'd think to look was the bedroom. It seems I was right." Daikai turned from the window, a genuine smile easing across his face. He rose and crossed the room, pulling the elder into an embrace that was unguarded, almost boyish. "I know," he replied softly. "And, truth be told, I've been trying to avoid being found." The elder sighed, rolling his eyes. "You are impossible," he muttered. "You need to go down there immediately. What is the Festival of Flame without its emperor?" Daikai exhaled, his smile fading into something more thoughtful. "And what is the festival without the dragon?" he asked, letting the word hang in the air like incense smoke. Before he could say more, the elder lifted a hand and placed it gently over Daichi's mouth. "No more," he said firmly. "Your father did not place me at your side to argue about the past. I am here to protect you. Nothing else." He lowered his hand, and the two began walking together through the palace halls. Lantern light spilled across polished floors, their reflections stretching and warping beneath their feet. Daichi's brow furrowed. "Juska," he said quietly, "I understand your duty, but this secret, I cannot carry it forever. It eats at me. Every day, I feel as though I am betraying my people." Juska slowed his pace, turning to face him. His expression softened. "Your father felt the same," he said. "And his father before him. But there is no path forward now. The truth has been buried too deep. To unearth it would tear the empire apart." They resumed walking. "Remember this," Juska continued, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Your son will take the throne sooner than you expect. When that day comes, this burden will no longer be yours." The words did not comfort Daikai as they were meant to. 40 years. Perhaps more. Decades of smiling, of lying, of guarding a secret sealed beneath the sacrifices of ancestors who had chosen silence over salvation. Freedom waited for him only at the far end of time, and even then, it would be stained by what had been hidden. At last, the doors to the grand hall opened. Sound rushed out to meet them. Music, laughter, the crackle of firelight. Lanterns blazed in shades of red and gold, their glow dancing across silk banners and painted pillars. The air was thick with the scent of spices and sweet wine. The festival of flame had already taken hold, vibrant and alive. As Daikai stepped inside, the crowd fell silent. All eyes turned toward him. Juska slowed, then carefully stepped away, melting into the edge of the hall. He bowed his head and left the emperor alone beneath the lantern light. Daikai 7 stood at the center of the celebration, crown heavy, smile composed, heart quiet. And somewhere deep underground within, the dragons slept, waiting. "Ladies and gentlemen, my esteemed people." The emperor's voice carried across the grand hall, steady and composed, resonating against towering pillars draped in deep crimson tapestries. Lanterns of gold and ember swayed gently overhead, their flames trembling as if listening. Musicians fell silent. Servants froze mid-step. All eyes turned toward the dais. "Tomorrow," Daikai 7 continued, "we gather not only to honor the dragon, but to celebrate our empire itself. To celebrate Ishu, whose legacy has endured for centuries." He paused, letting his gaze travel across the hall. Faces shone with anticipation, eyes reflecting firelight and devotion. In that moment, he appeared every inch the emperor they believed him to be. "For generations, they called us the weakest of empires," he said. "They mocked the dragon of hearts. Too small, too gentle, too fragile to rule beside its mighty siblings." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Yet it was that very heart," Daikai said, his voice warming, "that bound us together. It was my great-great-great-grandfather who saw that strength does not always roar. Sometimes, it endures. Sometimes, it loves. Sometimes, it survives." Applause rose like a wave. Smiles bloomed. Hands clapped until palms stung. And yet, beneath it all, something hollow lingered. The cheers slid over the emperor like rain over lacquered wood. Heard, acknowledged, but never absorbed. This ritual had been rehearsed countless times. Smiles practiced before mirrors. Joy worn like silk. The celebration shimmered beautifully, but it felt unreal, as if the hall itself were a painted screen hiding a darker room behind it. Daikai stepped down from the podium and moved toward the imperial table. His wife sat poised, hands folded neatly, her posture flawless. Pride touched her expression, but discomfort lingered at its edges like a crack in porcelain. He took his seat beside her. "You've been gone for hours," she said softly, leaning closer. "Where were you?" The question sounded harmless. Her eyes were not. "Because I am the emperor," he replied with a smile that showed teeth but little warmth, "and I owe no one an explanation." The air between them tightened. She inhaled slowly, mastering her expression, careful not to let her irritation spill into the public space. Around them, laughter resumed, light and careless. "I should tell you," she said quietly, "your son has taken to playing with dresses again." Daikai stiffened. "He watches you," she continued, her voice steady but weighted. "He's seen you embrace another man." The words fell between them like a dropped blade. Daikai turned sharply, his eyes narrowing, a warning burning behind them. Anger flared, quick and dangerous. She met his gaze without retreating. With a dry laugh, he looked away. "I don't understand why I'm still here," he said lightly, cloaking turmoil in humor. Around them, guests settled into their seats. Cups clinked. Conversations resumed. The Empire smiled. Then Juska returned. He walked to the center of the hall with measured confidence, carrying a massive golden book bound in ornate designs. The metal cover gleamed beneath the lantern light, etched with symbols of dragons and flame. Without a word, he placed it before the Emperor, bowed deeply, and stepped back into the crowd. Daikai stared down at the tome. "What is this?" he asked, confusion threading his voice. His wife's hand slipped beneath the table and rested gently on his leg. "You must read your father's final words," she said. His chest tightened. In issue, the dead often left behind a final message, sealed away until the appointed time. A farewell entrusted to fate. A truth delayed until it could no longer be undone. Daikai lifted the book. The hall's noise faded, replaced by a hush so complete it felt deliberate. He rose to his feet, holding the tome with both hands. "Here," he said, bowing his head, "are the final words of my father, written before his passing." The guests followed his lead, heads lowered in solemn respect. He opened the book. "My people," he read, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest, "and my beloved son." The words seemed to press against the air, heavy and expectant. "I write to you so that you may understand who we truly are, what it means to live, what it means to carry breath in this world." Daikai paused, swallowing. The lanterns flickered. The dragon's shadow stirred. And the truth, long buried, began to rise. The air in the grand hall thickened, as if incense had been burned too long without prayer. Lantern flames trembled. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, not yet fear, but the instinctive unease that precedes it. "I believe," Daikai said slowly, his voice carrying an unfamiliar gravity, "that the only one who could deliver this message is someone who has already departed from this world, much like myself." A few uncertain laughs surfaced, light and nervous, born from misunderstanding rather than relief. Daikai did not smile. "The dragon is weakening," he continued. "We cannot know how much longer he will endure, nor how long he can resist the disease that gnaws at him from within." At the word disease, the hall shifted. Daikai glanced toward Juska. The old priest's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face. Daikai gave a small, almost apologetic gesture, urging him to remain silent. He lowered his gaze, the parchment trembling faintly in his hands. A collective gasp swept through the hall like a sudden wind. "I ask you now," Daikai read, his voice steadier than his heart, "to prepare yourselves. This is not the end of issue, nor is it the collapse of our legacy. What approaches is change, a rebalancing." The room felt impossibly still. "I, along with a small few, have calculated the dragon's remaining time," he continued. "By our estimates, his passing will come 34 years from this moment." The words landed one by one, heavy as stones dropped into water. Faces drained of color. Some clutched their robes. Others stared ahead, unmoving, as though refusing to hear. "So, my son," Daikai read, his voice finally wavering, "and my people, be ready for what comes." He closed the book with a sharp, final snap. Without another word, he turned and ascended the heavenly stairs, his steps quick, his gaze fixed ahead. He did not look back. Behind him, whispers bloomed uncontrollably, fear threading through disbelief, doubt clashing with devotion. The ceremony faltered but did not break. The Empress rose, her posture flawless, her expression serene despite the storm beneath it. "I apologize for the heaviness of this revelation," she said gently. "The Emperor requires a moment of solitude. Please, let us continue the festival." Her eyes followed Daichi's retreating figure for half a breath too long. Juska approached her, offering a small bow and a smile worn thin by concern. Then he turned and hurried after the Emperor, the weight of the moment pressing hard against his chest. Beyond the eyes of the court, Juska quickened his steps. He removed his priestly hat, wiping sweat from his brow. "Your father is mad," he said quietly, breathless as he caught up. Daikai did not slow. "Why?" Juska asked, confusion sharpening his voice. "Did you read all of that aloud?" Daichi's reply was calm, almost distant. "Because you told me to read it." Juska exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I expected something different," he muttered. Not that. They moved through a dim corridor, lantern light stretching their shadows along the walls. Halfway to the chamber, Daikai stopped. Juska followed suit, lowering his voice. "We can't speak here. The guards are too close." Daikai nodded once. Together, they entered the Emperor's chamber, doors closing softly behind them, sealing out the world. Inside, silence settled like snow. Juska began to pace, fingers tugging at his beard as thoughts raced ahead of his steps. "What if," he said suddenly, "we announce that the dragon has recovered? A miracle. People would accept it." Juska said. Daikai sat on the edge of his bed, the ornate carvings beneath his palms grounding him. His gaze was distant. "Or," Daikai said slowly, "we let them believe the dragon is already dead." The words surprised even him. Juska froze. "That's madness." Daichi's voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been speaking with a being from another world." The room went still. Juska stared at him, eyes wide, breath caught between disbelief and dread. Outside, the festival of flame continued, lanterns rising into the night. Inside, two men stood at the edge of truth, staring into a future their ancestors had feared to name. And then, as though a distant bell had been struck beneath still water, Daikai shifted the conversation toward a deity that felt impossibly far from the present room. Juska blinked, his brows knitting together. "What are you talking about, Daikai?" he asked, his gaze moving over the Emperor as if searching for some hidden wound. There was no accusation in his voice, only confusion edged with concern. Daikai spoke slowly, as one might recount a dream that had not yet released its hold. He told him of a god who had appeared 3 days prior, while he stood beside the koi pond in the inner gardens, scattering grain for the royal ducks. The morning had been quiet then. Mist clung low to the water's surface, and the scent of wet stone and pine hung in the air. At first, Daikai had reached instinctively for the signal bell that would summon the guards. Yet something had stayed his hand. The being had not arrived with thunder or fire. It had simply been there, reflected faintly in the water like a second moon. Its presence carried a gravity that pressed gently against my chest, neither threatening nor comforting, but undeniably vast. The energy it radiated was clean and boundless, far surpassing even that of the dragon, he said, whose divinity had shaped their empire for centuries. Juska scoffed softly, turning away. "Of course it felt different," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "We have been draining the dragon by force for years. His divinity has been thinned, diluted. Any foreign presence would seem brighter by comparison. This sounds less like a god and more like a demon emperor playing tricks." He stepped back, tracing a warding sign in the air with 2 fingers, as though to push the idea away. Daikai shook his head, the movement sharp and final. "No," he said. "I know the difference. I was raised to know it." His voice lowered, reverent. This was not corruption. It was completion. The voice that spoke to me carried 2 harmonies at once. One deep and resonant, like a mountain echoing after a landslide. The other gentle and fluid, like silk sliding through water. Masculine and feminine, entwined without conflict. His eyes unfocused as memory overtook him. He knelt and took a handful of earth from the garden path. With no incantation, no seal, he shaped it. Fingers moved as though guided by inevitability, and the dirt became flesh. Daikai swallowed. The form he created was everything my heart has ever reached for in silence. Beautiful not because of perfection, but because he felt chosen. The god had smiled then, introducing himself as Marilyn. Not a title, not a rank, but a name spoken plainly, as if it required no reverence to command respect. Marilyn offered him a path unrecorded in any sacred text. Daikai could disappear from the world, his death announced with ceremony and grief. Another would ascend the throne in his stead. And Daikai would be free. Free to live, to wander, to love without concealment or apology. Juska sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, turning his back to Daikai, their shoulders nearly touching but never quite meeting. "And what do you gain from this?" he asked. His voice was controlled, but it trembled like a blade held too tightly. Daikai laughed softly, the sound breaking as tears slid down his face and caught in the light. "Freedom," he said, "and truth." He wiped his cheek with the heel of his hand. "I could love openly. I would no longer be forced to bury myself beneath robes and titles, condemned for desires that this empire quietly indulges yet publicly curses. I am tired, Juska, tired of being sculpted into something I was never meant to become." He turned toward the window, where paper screens filtered the moonlight into pale silver. "This perfection we perform," he continued, "is nothing more than a ritual of control. We manipulate faith, weaponize devotion, and call it order. When people fail us, we discard them, exile them, erase them. This world is not real. It is a stage built to keep everyone obedient." Juska's reply came sharper than he intended. "So you would abandon your faith for a dream?" Daichi's head snapped back toward him. "No," he said firmly. "This fate is the dream and I want reality. The throne, the religion, the dragon, all of it is illusion layered upon illusion. You know this, even if you refuse to say it." Silence settled between them, heavy and unyielding. Juska felt something within him loosen, like an old knot finally giving way. All the years he had spent guiding Daikai, correcting his posture, his speech, his thoughts, suddenly felt like offerings laid before the wrong altar. He saw now what had always been there. Daikai was never meant to rule by domination or divine mandate. Had he not been born of imperial blood, he would have been sent away without ceremony, perhaps even to Zoe's, dismissed as unsuitable. The failure was not Daichi's. It was the system that demanded he fracture himself to fit it. Juska exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging. For the first time, he did not argue. He could no longer ask Daikai to marry women he could never love, to hollow himself out in service of a lie. In that quiet chamber, surrounded by incense and shadows, Juska finally understood that loyalty did not always mean obedience. Sometimes, it meant letting the emperor go. He could no longer ask another soul to live folded in half, to wear a lacquered mask and bow before the world, declaring, "This is who I am," while knowing it was a carefully painted lie. Such a request was not loyalty. It was cruelty disguised as duty. "Okay," Juska said at last. The word fell between them like a single stone dropped into a deep well. He spoke it slowly, as though testing whether it would break if handled too roughly. His voice betrayed him despite his efforts. A thin tremor slipped through, exposing the fracture beneath his calm. "That's all you have to say?" Daikai asked quietly. He wiped his face with his sleeve, brushing away the remnants of tears he had not given himself permission to shed until now. His exhaustion clung to him like damp robes after rain. Juska looked away. "I need time," he said. The admission tasted bitter. He rose to his feet, every movement deliberate, as if his body had suddenly forgotten how to carry itself. With each step toward the door, it felt as though invisible weights had been sewn into his pockets. Heavy, round, unforgiving, like a pouch of old ceremonial coins pressing against his hips. He did not bow before leaving. The door slid shut behind him with a soft, final sound. Daikai remained where he was. He turned toward the window, his gaze unfocused, resting somewhere beyond the palace walls and the careful geometry of the garden paths. The future lay ahead like an unpainted scroll, blank and unsettling. Yet beneath the uncertainty, something unfamiliar stirred within him. A lightness, subtle, almost frightening in its gentleness. As if a pressure he had endured for so long had finally loosened its grip. A single tear slipped free. At that moment, a white dove crossed the frame of the window, wings cutting silently through the evening air. Daikai rose abruptly, heart leaping, and stepped closer, but the sky had already deepened into indigo. The bird was gone. Whether it had been real or merely a passing omen, he could not say. Far from the palace, on the stone staircase leading toward Ishu's domain, Sug and Eason slept where they had collapsed. Their breathing was slow, uneven, human. Above them, Marilyn watched in silence. He stood apart from the world, as he always had, looking down upon their fragile forms. Admiration swelled in his chest, followed closely by sorrow. Faces from his past drifted through his thoughts like ghosts carried on wind. His daughter, the love he had buried beneath centuries of regret. His brother called Cherub. Instead of guiding light, he had left scorched earth behind him. For a moment, the weight of those memories threatened to anchor him there. But gods, too, could drown in reflection. Marilyn straightened, drawing a slow breath, and descended. He knelt beside Soog and placed 2 fingers gently against the boy's shoulder. "Wake," he said softly. "We linger too long. Time does not wait for sleepers." Soog stirred, groaning, rubbing his eyes as if trying to scrub the dreams away. He turned, squinting, and noticed Eason sprawled just below him, limbs loose, utterly unguarded. "Wake the girl," Marilyn said as he turned and began climbing the stairs once more. Then it came. A sharp sound tore through the stillness. Swish. Marilyn froze. He turned at once, heart tightening, and saw Soog standing alone at the base of the steps. The space where Eason had been was empty. In an instant, Marilyn was beside him. His gaze darted downward, and the world seemed to tilt. The mirror maze below lay shattered, its beauty reduced to jagged ruin. Among the broken reflections, Eason's body lay still, twisted unnaturally against the stone. Marilyn turned away, bile burning his throat. He could not look longer. He faced Soog instead. "Why?" His voice shook despite his effort. "Why did you do this?" Soog looked up at him and smiled. It was not the smile of a child. It was not even human. It was a shape worn over something vast and wrong, like a shrine defiled from within. In that moment, Marilyn felt something colder than fear coil through him. This was not malice born of pain or ignorance. This was madness untouched by mercy. And as Soog's eyes gleamed with that unholy calm, Marilyn understood that something precious had been broken beyond simple repair. He was smiling too widely. The grin stretched from ear to ear, almost ceremonial in its devotion, yet it clashed with the feverish crimson blooming across his cheeks. Beneath that smile, his face trembled. In his eyes lingered the shine of tears that had not yet fallen, suspended as if undecided whether they belonged to grief or joy. But it was the eyes themselves that unsettled Marilyn most. They were deep, unnaturally clear, like still water reflecting a storm sky. Something within them pressed forward, urgent and unspoken. A silent warning, an unvoiced plea. They seemed to beg him to turn away, to leave at once, to not look too closely at what had taken root inside Soog. It was not merely the damage inflicted by his father. This fracture ran deeper, like a fault line hidden beneath a polished floor, waiting for the moment it would split the ground apart. "Come on," Marilyn said, forcing motion into his limbs. "We don't have much time." He turned and began climbing the crumbling steps, each one worn smooth by centuries of passage. As he moved, a wave of revulsion crept up his spine, the sensation of something dark following too close behind, breathing where it should not be. Soog followed in silence. His footsteps were soft, deliberate, as if he were carefully measuring each movement, conserving strength. It felt impossible to reconcile the boy's calm with what had just occurred. A life had ended. An innocent one. The truth of it clung to the air like damp fog. Yet Marilyn found no judgment rising within him. His own past lay heavy on his conscience, stained with choices he could never wash clean. Grace's face flickered unbidden through his thoughts. He had no right to condemnation. Not when his hands were no cleaner than Soog's. As they climbed, night loosened its grip on the sky. The moon paled, retreating like a reluctant guardian, and dawn unfurled in its place. The horizon burned with autumn color. Amber, vermilion, soft gold. The world looked impossibly gentle for a morning born from blood. "Today is the day," Marilyn said, glancing back. "You rise. Like a phoenix. No, like a dragon." Soog lifted his gaze, eyes blazing with fervor. "It is," he said at once. "I've waited my entire life for this." The intensity of his reply sent a quiet shiver through Marilyn. He slowed his steps. "Have you?" he asked lightly. "Or have you been waiting for your father to finally see you?" Soog's jaw tightened. "Not this again," he snapped. His voice sharpened, irritation spilling through the cracks. "I've told you already. This is what I want. It's in my blood. It's my destiny. He stamped his foot against the stone, the sound echoing sharply along the stairway, as if sealing a vow. Marilyn considered that word, destiny. He had learned long ago that fate was rarely a straight road. It twisted, doubled back, offered countless entrances to the same ending. Just as he drew breath to say so, Soog stopped abruptly. "Stop telling me who I am supposed to be," Soog shouted. The sound cut the morning air. Marilyn halted behind him. For a moment, neither spoke. Marilyn lowered his gaze to his boots, scuffed and worn, then looked up again. Soog's stare was fierce, unyielding, burning with a conviction that could either forge or destroy him. A small smile touched Marilyn's lips. Not mockery. Acceptance. "All right," he said quietly. He turned and continued upward. "How close are we?" Soog demanded, his voice edged with impatience as he followed, steps quickening. Marilyn tilted his head slightly, eyes flicking toward the brightening sky. "Very close," he replied. "We should arrive just in time for the Festival of Flames." Ahead of them, the path narrowed. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Lanterns would soon be lit, drums would soon sound. And beneath the promise of celebration, something far more dangerous was already awake. As I ready myself to return to Marilyn, and from there to Soog, my thoughts drift like slow-moving clouds toward Issue, where the day is already unfolding with quiet significance. Today marks the beginning of the Festival of Flames, a sacred celebration woven into the marrow of the Empire. It is not merely a festival, but a collective breath, an offering of remembrance and devotion to both the royal lineage and the ancient dragon who has watched over Issue since its first stones were laid. At dawn, before the city fully wakes, a single candle is lit. This act is performed in near silence. Doors are slid open just enough to let the morning air enter, incense mingling with the scent of dew-wet stone. The flame is small, humble, yet it carries centuries of gratitude. Each color speaks a language older than words. Blue is lit for family, for the ties that endure even when strained. Red burns for love, fierce and consuming. Pink flickers for healing and survival, for bodies and spirits that refuse to yield. Green is offered for prosperity, yellow for long life and the purity of simply existing. White is the thread of continuity, black the promise that endings are never final, and grey the quiet respect given to wisdom earned through time. When the people of Issue light their candles, they bow their heads, palms together, not asking for more, but thanking the dragon for what already is. Later comes the moment of color, a celebration that feels almost rebellious in its joy. Children chase elders through the streets, laughter ringing like bells as paint is flung without restraint. Crimson streaks across sleeves, indigo stains cheeks, gold splashes against hair and skin. No one remains untouched. For this brief moment, rank dissolves. The city becomes a living canvas, layered with shared laughter and fleeting happiness, a reminder that even within rigid order, joy can spill freely. Then the parade arrives. Drums thunder through the avenues, shaking banners loose from their poles. Floats carved with dragons, flames, and ancestral heroes roll past, glittering beneath silk streamers. Beads arc through the air, candies rain down, and children scramble with shrieks of delight. The city hums, alive and unified, as though Issue itself were walking forward on countless feet. As night descends, the festival turns inward. Each person presents a brown candle, carefully placed within a white lantern. These are not wishes made for the living. They are offerings to the absent. For parents lost to illness, friends claimed by war, lovers who crossed into Zoes and never returned. When the lanterns are lit and released, they rise slowly, hundreds upon hundreds, drifting upward like souls finding their way home. "We still remember you," the people murmur as one. "We will not forget." The words linger long after the lanterns disappear into the dark. While the city prepares, the Emperor does not join the movement. He sits by his window, still as a carved figure in an old shrine, watching banners sway and servants hurry below. His thoughts are elsewhere. He waits, not for the festival, but for Marilyn, for the god whose presence unsettled the foundations of his certainty. He wonders if she will come, or if she was only ever a reflection shaped by longing. The Shattering slides open behind him. A group of women enter, their steps soft, their silk robes layered in pale hues that whisper as they move. Gold and jade glimmer at their throats and wrists. The light catches them like falling stars. The emperor rises instinctively. Without prompting, the first woman smiles, her expression practiced yet kind. "Come, my emperor. Your wife has sent us. The festival will not wait." He nods and allows them to guide him toward the mirror. As they begin to unfasten his garments, their movements precise and reverent, he studies his reflection. The man staring back feels strangely unfamiliar. Too perfect. Too composed. For a fleeting moment, he thinks of the figure Marilyn shaped from earth and wonders if they are one and the same. "Do you know when the parade begins?" he asks quietly. "In 4 hours," one of them replies with a light laugh. 4 hours. Enough time to be crowned in silk. Not enough time to escape. Doubt coils in his chest. Was Marilyn real? Or was he merely another illusion born from desperation? Either way, the empire feels unbearably narrow. The walls press inward. The rituals, once comforting, now feel like chains polished until they gleam. He dreams of departure, of horizons untouched by doctrine, of lands beyond issue and zoes, where mountains breathe differently and oceans speak unfamiliar tongues. He imagines a vessel that sails the sky itself, cutting through clouds like water, carrying him toward wonders unseen by imperial eyes. The call of that distant world hums softly within him. And even as silk is draped over his shoulders and jewels fastened at his throat, the emperor's heart leans outward, yearning for the moment he might finally step beyond the flame and into the unknown. As he cupped the essence of a raging ocean within his hands, it did not roar. It breathed. The power trembled like a living thing, heavy with salt and memory, carrying within it the echoes of storms that had swallowed ships and the quiet persistence of tides that never ceased. In its depths, he saw countless lives reflected, people bent beneath disaster, rising again through stubborn will. Victory and ruin intertwined, inseparable. In that stillness, he understood something he had long resisted. There was no refuge in fantasy. Reality, with all its fractures and suffering, was the only place where meaning could truly take root. A small smile touched his lips as he lifted his gaze to the mirror. The man who looked back no longer appeared distant or hollow. His eyes were clear. Today was not merely ceremonial. It was a threshold. A day in which hope did not arrive as prophecy, but as choice. A woman stepped forward and draped rose-gold silk across his shoulders. The fabric was warm against his skin, its deep crimson shifting with each movement, catching the light like embers stirred by wind. Gold threads gleamed beneath the surface, as if flame itself had been woven into the cloth. It felt less like adornment and more like armor forged from intention. She brought forth another robe, reverently unfolding it. The silk bore a woven tail, a dragon locked in battle, claws turned against its own kin. Scales splintered. Fire clashed with fire. And at the heart of the struggle was not conquest, but escape. Freedom burned brighter than blood. The image struck him deeply, as if the cloth had been waiting for him alone. His hair was gathered next. With practiced grace, her fingers combed through the long strands, twisting them upward into a thick knot. Each motion was gentle, respectful, the way one handles something sacred. Powder followed. A touch of color warmed his cheeks. His features were refined, sharpened, elevated, until the face that emerged seemed carved by both human hands and divine will. She lifted a single earring, gold set with pearls like drops of moonlight. As she trimmed away his beard, each cut clean and deliberate, she placed the ornament into his right ear. The metal was cool. The weight of it steadied him. "Look at you," one of the women murmured, unable to hide her awe. "Our great emperor." He exhaled slowly. "There is one more thing," he said. His voice was calm, but resolute. "I want my hair cut." Silence fell like a drawn curtain. The women exchanged glances, unease rippling across their faces. In issue, uncut hair was not vanity. It was covenant. A living thread binding ruler to dragon, past to present. "Are you certain?" the first woman asked softly. Her eyes searched his, hoping for hesitation. He met her gaze and allowed a small, knowing smile. "Yes," he said. "All of it." He turned back to the mirror. The scissors glinted as they were raised, reflecting both his face and the future pressing forward. With the first cut, long strands fell soundlessly to the floor. Then another. And another. Hair that had never known release slid away, severed cleanly, until his scalp was bare, smooth, exposed. The sensation was startling. Cool air brushed his skin. He felt lighter, awake, like someone newly born into breath. At that moment, the door slid open. Juska entered, his presence immediately altering the room's balance. He stopped, eyes narrowing as they took in the fallen hair, the unfinished cut, the Emperor transformed mid-ritual. The woman froze, hands trembling. "I need to speak with the Emperor," Juska said, his tone measured but unyielding. Understanding passed between the attendants without further word. They bowed deeply and withdrew, Silk whispering as the door closed behind them. Left alone, the Emperor faced the mirror once more. The past lay at his feet, and behind him stood the weight of what came next. "We need to speak about last night," Juska said quietly. His voice was low, careful, as if raised tones might fracture something already fragile. The Emperor turned toward him. He closed the distance between them and rested his hand on Juska's right shoulder, the touch steady and deliberate, not seeking comfort but offering resolve. "I know what you believe," the Emperor said. His eyes were clear, unflinching. "And I know what you are about to say. But this is my life. I alone will decide whether I fly or fall." His fingers tightened slightly. "Do not deny me that choice. Do not deny me life." Juska bowed his head. The word struck him like a temple bell, reverberating long after the sound itself had faded. When he lifted his gaze again, his eyes were softened, no longer guarded by duty alone. "I won't," he said. "Your father entrusted you to me. He asked me to protect you, to temper you, to prepare you for the throne." His voice wavered. "But he also asked me to be something else. Your friend, your family, the presence he could never fully be." The admission lodged in his chest. Juska bowed again, this time deeper, fighting the ache rising in his throat. "There is no time for tears," he said at last. "Only time to live, to breathe, to learn." He straightened, resolve settling into his posture. "I will not stand in your way. Now come. Let us give them a day they will speak of long after the lanterns fade." When Juska looked up, the Emperor was crying openly. Tears traced clean paths down his face, unhidden, unashamed. He stepped forward and folded into Juska's arms, the strength he carried finally giving way. Juska held him without hesitation, firm and unmoving, like the trunk of an ancient tree weathering a storm. "We are family," Juska murmured. "Always." The Emperor nodded against his chest. "Yes," he said softly. He pulled back, wiping his face with the heel of his hand. His spine straightened. His shoulders settled. Whatever grief remained, he gathered it inward, storing it where it would no longer lead him. Together, they opened the grand doors after the woman fixed his makeup. The upper halls were hushed, echoing, and nearly empty, but below them the castle pulsed with life. The first floor surged like a river at flood. Servants hurried past carrying wood, silk, and paint. Craftsmen shouted measurements. Laughter burst out like sparks from struck stone. In one corner, women danced in flowing white, fans opening and closing in practiced rhythm, their movements light as drifting petals. The Emperor's gaze drifted and stopped. Among the crowd stood a man as if shaped by intention rather than chance. His presence was calm, centered. Black marble eyes reflected the world with impossible clarity, like polished obsidian mirrors. His hair fell to his shoulders, dark and weightless, framing a face that carried peace rather than pride. When he smiled, it felt ancient, as though dragons themselves remembered that expression. The Emperor smiled without realizing he had done so. The man raised his hand and waved. Juska followed the Emperor's gaze, blinking. "Compose yourself," he muttered, though a reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. "Where is this Marilyn you keep speaking of?" The Emperor laughed, bright and unrestrained, the sound of someone tasting freedom for the first time. "Marilyn has already done what he came to do," he said. "He's right there." Juska sighed, rolling his eyes, though warmth lingered in his expression. Today truly is unusual. Outside, the streets bloomed with celebration. 143 golden rings rolled through the crowd, each bound with a crimson ribbon. Children chased them, adults laughed, and strangers spun together as the rings clattered across stone, catching sunlight and joy in equal measure. Then the air changed. A boy, scarcely 12, reached out for one of the rings. Before his fingers could close, a guard seized him violently, yanking him to the ground. "How dare you?" the guard roared. "To disrespect the dragon and the royal family. You and your bloodline will pay for this." Gasps tore through the crowd. The boy's parents rushed forward, panic etched into every movement. "Please," the mother cried. "He is just a child." The guard laughed. "We were all children once." More guards converged, weapons gleaming. "Your son has no right to be here," one snarled. "This festival is not for the unworthy." The mother screamed as she was dragged back. The father was thrown to the ground, boots pressing him into the stone. "This is not Zoe's," the guard shouted. "This is holy ground. This is heaven." He raised his baton. "And those who do not belong will be cast out." The music faltered. Laughter died. From the balcony above, the emperor watched. And in that moment, the celebration cracked, revealing the truth beneath the flame. He screamed for his life. The sound tore through the street, sharp and raw, yet it dissolved almost instantly, swallowed by the crowd. People turned away as one might turn from an unpleasant smell. Some frowned. Others clicked their tongues softly, irritation rather than alarm flickering across their faces. Their eyes settled on the child not with pity, but with blame. Why was he there? Did his parents teach him nothing? No one asked why a grown man's hand was raised against a child. No one questioned the law that allowed such violence to wear the robes of righteousness. This was a world long accustomed to cruelty. Brutality had become ritual, as ordinary as sweeping the front step each morning. The people had learned to dull their senses, to wrap their hearts in silence. What unfolded before them felt familiar, almost expected. A wrong action, a swift punishment, balance restored. So they told themselves. The guard's face twisted into something obscene, a smile pulled too tight, eyes alight with pleasure rather than duty. Each strike landed with intention, not correction. The golden ring clattered across the stones, rolling uselessly away, its red ribbon stained by dust. What should have been a symbol of celebration became an offering to violence. Mistakes here were not met with guidance. They were crushed. Compassion was a luxury no longer remembered. As the child curled inward, arms raised in a futile shield, a hush settled over the onlookers. It was not reverence. It was emptiness. Time seemed to pause, yet the people continued breathing, blinking, shifting their weight. Somewhere, someone laughed. Somewhere else, music resumed. A quiet certainty drifted through the air like falling ash. This child would never scream like that again. The festival pressed on. Lanterns swayed. Drums beat. Joy was performed with practiced precision. Horror and celebration coexisted, layered like lacquer over rot. Could one imagine such a place? A world where cruelty was not hidden, but displayed. Where suffering became spectacle, and the highest form of empathy was a muttered thought. At least it was not me. Homes stood close together, yet warmth did not pass between them. Even the gentlest touch felt sharp, as if kindness itself had forgotten how to be soft. As anticipation swelled, families gathered outside their houses, children hoisted onto shoulders, elders leaning on canes polished smooth by years. The first great float emerged, followed by another and another. On the fourth sat the emperor, composed and radiant, his posture immaculate. At his side stood Tzatziki, vigilant, his presence both shield and shadow. A soldier in crimson armor approached, bowing deeply before murmuring into Tzatzki's ear. The sound of the ceremonial horn cut through the air. Tzatziki stiffened. The emperor noticed immediately. His calm fractured, just slightly, like porcelain under pressure. "Tzatziki," he said softly, "is something wrong?" His smile trembled, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Are you ready?" For a moment, he seemed smaller, younger. Then something settled inside him. "I am," the emperor said, lifting his chin. "Let them in." The floats rolled forward. The crowd roared. Tzatziki glanced ahead, toward the float carrying the imperial family. And them? He asked, unease threading his voice. They lack nothing, the emperor replied quietly. Soon, she will as well. Sadness veiled his words. This is the turning point. No more illusions. Only truth. He covered his eyes, breath hitching. This empire will fall, he whispered. It must. From its ruins, freedom will rise. I pray my son will walk at the front of that march. That he will break what I could not. His voice thinned. May the All-Dragon bear witness. May the one who inherits this throne never use it for vanity, nor poison the roots laid by those before us. I wish for a world where all trees grow together, where houses are truly homes, where people may live as themselves. He wiped his face and looked to the sky, steel returning to his spine. I will prepare the boat and the man, Juska said. Doubt shadowed his eyes. But remember, once this begins, there is no return. The floats moved. Cheers thundered. Elsewhere, far from lantern light, Marilyn and Sug ascended a narrow staircase. The stone was damp beneath their feet. Marilyn halted at the top, eyes narrowing with satisfaction. Sug lagged behind, breathless, then dropped to sit. Why did you stop? He asked. Marilyn laughed quietly. Because everything is unfolding as planned. My brother and his little guardian are far too occupied. He stepped through the open doorway, darkness welcoming him. Sug stared after him, dread tightening his chest. You planned all of this, he said. Marilyn did not turn back. Marilyn tilted his head back, letting out a slow breath as if savoring the stench of iron and rot that hung in the air. A faint smile traced his lips while he waded forward. The swamp that swallowed the lower tunnels was neither river nor sea, but an uneasy marriage of both. Brackish water lapped against their waists, heavy with salt and decay, clinging to cloth and skin alike. Each step stirred unseen things beneath the surface, soft bodies brushing past their legs like unspoken warnings. Above them, stone sweated. Moss crept along the walls like old ink bleeding through parchment. Somewhere far above, the festival drums throbbed faintly, distorted by layers of earth and water, as if the world above belonged to another lifetime. Before you climb back into the light, Marilyn said at last, his voice light, almost courteous, there are matters we must settle. He did not look back. I reached an agreement with the Emperor. Sug barely heard him at first. His thoughts churned louder than the water, louder than the distant drums. When the words finally sank in, irritation sharpened his breath. He turned sharply, eyes flashing. An agreement, he demanded. What did you promise him? Marilyn stopped. The water stilled around him. He turned his head just enough for Sug to see the curve of his smile. You will not kill him, Marilyn said calmly. You will let the world believe he is dead. And when the dust settles, you will take his throne. The water rippled violently as Sug halted. For a heartbeat, he simply stared, disbelief carving deep lines across his face. Then his expression hardened, heat rising fast and uncontrollable. I will not fake his death, Sug said, each word measured, shaking with restrained fury. I will end his life myself. His fists clenched. He stole everything from my family. I will stain his legacy with blood. I will take his wife, his children, his future. I will leave him empty. Marilyn turned fully now. He stepped closer, water whispering around his legs, eyes narrowing as though appraising a blade for cracks. Enough, he said. You know where the rot truly lies. Not with him. Not with them. His voice sharpened. It began with your father, with his choices, and with the child you once were. Sug flinched. You looked that woman in the eyes and killed her, Marilyn continued, voice rising like a drawn blade. You called her family. You laughed with her. And when the moment came, you discarded her without hesitation. He pressed a hand to his chest, mock solemn. I have walked alongside demons, and even they recoiled from acts like that. He laughed, slipping slightly on the stone, catching himself on the wall. You are given a banquet of life, and instead of eating, you complain about the flavor. Then his tone shifted. Lower. Still. But here is the truth you cannot escape. He leaned in. You cannot kill me. Soog's breath hitched. "No blade you raise, no poison you pour, no fire you summon will erase me," Marilyn said softly. "That is why I can speak plainly. I thought I understood you once. Now I see the emptiness beneath the skin." He stepped closer, lifting his hand. His fingers brushed Soog's cheek, gentle, almost tender. His gaze pierced straight through him. "There is no soul here," Marilyn murmured. "No spark. Only a shadow, walking the same path as his father." His thumb traced away, leaving cold behind. "Every sin circles back. You will face them all." He withdrew his hand and turned away, resuming his walk through the water as if the conversation were finished. Soog stood frozen. The tunnels seemed to close in, stone and water pressing against him. It was not just the weight of Marilyn's words that bound him. It was the certainty behind them. He could not touch him. He could not end him. And in that realization, something far more dangerous than rage began to take root. After a long while, Soog finally moved. He followed close behind Marilyn, their silhouette stretching thin along the sewer walls as lantern light faded into near darkness. The tunnels breathed like something alive. Water dripped in slow, patient rhythms. Each footstep vanished into the stone, swallowed without echo, as if the earth itself wished to forget them. The air was heavy, soaked with damp rot and old salt. It pressed against the lungs, insisting on silence. Then Marilyn stopped. His gaze lifted, sharp and intent, catching a faint shimmer above. Not light, exactly, but the promise of it. He reached upward, fingers finding cold iron, and with a strained groan peeled back the rusted lid. Daylight spilled downward like a blade, cutting through the gloom. Marilyn climbed first. Fresh air struck him with startling force, scented with incense, flowers, and humanity. He emerged into a narrow alley wedged between towering buildings, their walls looming close, as if whispering secrets to one another. Sounds flooded in. Drums. Laughter. The layered hum of thousands of voices woven together. He turned and offered his hand. Soog hesitated only a heartbeat before taking it. Marilyn pulled him up with ease and sealed the lid behind them. With a lazy flick of his fingers, reality bent. Mud-stained garments shimmered, folding into silk and cotton, festival colors blooming across their bodies until they were indistinguishable from the crowd. "Stay close," Marilyn murmured. "The king's float is the fourth." Soog nodded, though defiance simmered beneath his calm. His eyes roamed the street. Soldiers stood like pillars of iron along the procession, armor gleaming, weapons steady. Their formation was flawless. Absolute. A wall meant to inspire obedience. And yet, Soog smiled. A plan took shape. Not shadows. Not deception. He would take the Emperor's life in full view of heaven and earth. Marilyn felt it instantly. The wind carried his voice, quiet and firm, brushing Soog's ear despite the distance between them. "Do not kill him on the float. Challenge him. That is the law of issue." Soog laughed, bright and sharp, the sound of someone who had already decided. "I don't take orders," he said lightly. "You brought me here. That's all." The crowd erupted as the Empress and Crown Prince passed, their smiles polished and perfect. Soog slipped through the mass, spotting a narrow opening between soldiers. His pulse surged. The fourth float approached. He leaned forward. Then everything stopped. A cold sensation wrapped around his spine, threading through his limbs like invisible strings. His body moved without permission, feet stepping calmly into the open street. Soldiers froze mid-breath, eyes unfocused, as if caught in a dream they could not wake from. Soog screamed internally. Marilyn had taken hold. Before the Emperor's float, Soog raised his arm and pointed directly at Daikai 7. Juska reacted first. "What are you doing? Seize him." Panic cracked his voice. The Empress turned, joy dissolving into horror. The street fell silent. "I challenge Emperor Daikai 7, Soog declared, his voice echoing unnaturally, "for the throne of issue. A throne that is mine by right." A collective gasp rippled outward. Daikai 7 rose slowly. Fury carved his expression into something ancient and immovable. "This is my land," he thundered, "and I accept." Reality folded. Stone surged upward, tearing free from unseen depths. An arena rose into the sky, vast and unyielding, shaped as a nonagon, its design echoing an age long buried. This was the arena of Renji and Haruto, forged to decide succession not by blood, but by strength. High above the city, unseen by most, the battlefield locked into place. The rule was simple: fall and be erased. Sug stood on one edge, the Emperor on the other, the wind howling between them like a judge with no mercy. Daikai studied him. "Who are you?" Sug smiled thinly. "Sug," he said, "the one who will end you. And your line. I don't care what Marilyn promised." Above them, the sky remained silent. And the duel began to breathe. "I am the Emperor now," he declared, laughter rolling from his chest like thunder echoing through a mountain hall. The sound lingered beneath the high ceiling, brushing against carved pillars and painted dragons frozen in mid-flight. "This world bends by my will." His smile thinned, sharpened. "You have watched me for a long time, haven't you?" His gaze slid to Sug, slow and appraising. "Marilyn never said you would wear such a shape. There is a beast under your skin. I can hear it breathing." Sug's eyes burned, pupils tight as a predator's. "You hear correctly," he said. "I am an animal." His voice was calm, almost reverent. "And I will peel your wife's face away and wear it before the Empire." He spread his left arm wide, as if welcoming applause, a grin blooming with grotesque delight. The air changed. The Emperor's smile vanished like mist burned away by the sun. Fury surged through him. He lunged forward, his heels striking stone. Fire bloomed where his foot met the floor, flames roaring upward in a sudden violent breath. Sug twisted aside, heat licking past him, the smell of scorched air biting at his senses. The Emperor did not stop. He turned with the fluid grace of a practiced warrior, robes snapping like banners in a storm, his next kick slicing through space. Sug barely slipped beneath it, the wind of the strike brushing his hair. Sug latched onto the Emperor's leg, fingers digging in like claws. In his hand gleamed a slender needle, shimmering faintly, almost beautiful. He drove it into flesh. The Emperor staggered. Sug struck. His fists moved in rapid succession, each blow precise, relentless, fueled by something ancient and feral. Bone rang beneath skin. Breath burst from lungs. Then, on the final strike, pain exploded through Sug's hand, a searing heat like grasping molten iron. He recoiled, a sharp hiss escaping him. Still, he pressed on. His right arm continued to move, driven by instinct alone, striking again and again as the burn spread, forcing him down to one knee. Steam curled from his palm. Then the air stilled. Marilyn appeared behind the Emperor, her presence sudden and absolute. He seized his shoulder, fingers biting in with divine strength. "This is not what we agreed upon," he said, his voice low, trembling with urgency. The Emperor laughed, though desperation cracked through it. "This was never about Marilyn," he snapped. "You promised me peace. You promised my people would be safe. I will not allow another Empress Kiyomi II to poison this throne." He placed his hand atop Sug's head, eyes dark and burning. "I'm sorry, but him truly not," Marilyn said. "He throw him." The Emperor fell. A collective gasp tore through the city as his body plummeted, robes twisting, crown flashing once before vanishing into the void below. "Look!" someone screamed. "The Emperor!" Silence swallowed the streets. The Empress pressed a hand to her chest, tears spilling freely as she watched her husband disappear. Juska turned away, shame and grief crushing his breath. One by one, others followed, unable to bear witness. The dragon's lineage, once thought eternal, had shattered. An outsider now ruled them. No one spoke. Fear sealed their mouths. Marilyn knelt and took Sug's hand, pale light pooling around his scorched palm. "You are Emperor now," he said quietly. "As promised." Her healing faltered. He looked at him with something like sorrow. "I want you to keep these scars, so you never forget the pain you give." Sug threw his head back and laughed, sharp and feral, the sound of something that delighted in ruin. "Do not call me that," he said. "My name is Emperor Zaki." And with that, a new age began, born not with ceremony, but with blood and falling fire.